Ray, people will come, Ray. They'll come to Iowa for reasons they can't even fathom. They'll turn up your driveway, not knowing for sure why they're doing it. They'll arrive at your door as innocent as children, longing for the past. Of course, we won't mind if you look around, you'll say. It's only $20 per person. They'll pass over the money without even thinking about it. For it is money they have, and peace they like.
Ray, just sign the papers.
And they'll walk out to the bleachers. And sit in shirt sleeves on a perfect afternoon. They'll find they have reserved seats somewhere along one of the baselines. Where they sat when they were children and cheered their heroes. And they'll watch the game. And it'll be as if they'd dipped themselves in magic waters. The memories will be so thick they'll have to brush them away from their faces.
Ray, when the bank opens in the morning, they'll foreclose.
People will come, Ray.
You're broke, Ray. You sell now or you lose everything.
The one constant through all the years, Ray, has been baseball. America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers. It's been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again. But baseball has marked the time. This field, this game, is a part of our past, Ray. It reminds us of all that once was good, and it could be again. Oh, people will come, Ray. People will most definitely come.
Good morning, Cubs and Cardinals fans. Welcome to the Team of Rivals podcast. It's Saturday, August 14th, or September 14th. And, there's not much left of the baseball season. There's not much left to talk about for either of our teams. But obviously, the passing of James Earl Jones warrants, I think, its own special episode. So Elliott was supposed to join us. We know he's not going to. 8 o'clock is too early in the morning for him. So that scene still gets me every single time. Yeah. It's why you have a heart out this morning. It's why the lad and I are going to go watch possibly the worst team in the history of baseball tomorrow. We're going for the campfire milkshake, but you could probably get that recreated anywhere. But we're
quick
still
trip
going
to the grocery stores. Save yourself a heartache, right?
Yep. But still, we're going to head downtown and then to the south side of the city because it does remind us of everything that's been good. And that could be again.
Had a much different idea for how to start the show off, but I think I'll save that for later. That was I tell you, for me, that guy, like, there's one character that comes to mind front and center, and it always has and always will.
Oh, we'll get to him later. I have a few clips.
Okay. Well, we'll save it. But for me, it's like I try to do the inventory in my head of everywhere we've heard this guy's voice, and geez, it's a pretty extensive list. You have to go to his IMDb page if you want to remember each and everything. But that's kind of crappy news. It's about as bad as what we had 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Boy, there's not many left.
No, there aren't.
That Hamill, he's not going anywhere for a while.
No, he's not. Although,
is he gonna be the last one standing, or is it going to be Ford?
No, it's going to be Hamill.
I think so too. Or George.
Ford takes a little bit too much of his life in his own hands every time he climbs into a plane, or come on, he's 80, he's running around like
he's the least likely, I think, to go by natural causes.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because as I was cutting clips this morning, I was thinking about it. And I was like, this one hurts. How bad is it going to hurt when Lucas goes? And how bad is it going to hurt when we lose Ford? And I think that Ford actually is going to be the one that really stings when you think about all the iconic characters that he's created through the years.
Sure. Yeah. And you couple that compete with how Hollywood can't create anything new.
Yeah.
We keep remaking things that worked really well once because they were the first of their kind and kind of established things. And I tell you, Hollywood just fails to create anything new. Even the big money makers, right? Like, they had to remake Dune.
Right.
One of the more expensive and I guess popular TV shows or streaming shows at this point has been Rings of Power, right? That's not an original idea either. So I don't know, man. Storytellers, writers, Hollywood, where you at? My kids are watching the same shit that I did.
Yeah.
It might be a new version, but it's the same stuff.
Yep. And it's because it speaks to something universal, right? And that's what ultimately makes films, television, podcasts, anything. That's what makes it long lasting, is that it tells us something true.
Yeah, my kids they need their generation's version of the Goonies. They need something like that.
Yeah.
They just don't have it. It can't just exist out there on TikTok, guys. Hollywood, let's go. Come on, wake up, do something.
And if you don't, somebody else will. Atlanta, Nashville, somewhere else will pick up what you're dropping.
Yeah, it'd be interesting too, right? When somebody creates their first volume at home or some equivalent and just starts doing it on their own, because whatever the culture we have today just won't create anything new, or they're afraid to.
Well, and the fact that we have much better cameras in our pockets than George Lucas had when he was shooting Star Wars in 1976.
Well, I mean, I have a really good camera, but I refuse to turn the lights on because I'm not in a great space. You gotta have lighting too, to make them work.
But think about it: the camera on your phone, as far as quality and storage, if you solely dedicate your phone to being your camera, you can film a much longer scene with your phone George Lucas could in 1976.
It's in 1977 the Voyager 1 and 2 launched. I watched a little thing on YouTube last night about that, because that's how exciting about Friday night it was. The memory that was the storage capability that those two probes had are a fraction of what you have in your pocket. It is amazing.
Joke.
It was cutting edge at the time.
It was.
It was beyond what I remember. The first home PC I bought had, I think, 4 gigabytes. And I remember when I bought it, it was the guy said, most PCs out there are like kiddie pools, and you have like an ocean of memory on your 4 gigabytes, man. That was something at the time. The card I have in my board and you have in your board are at least 4, if not like 8 times the size of my first PC, which was supposed to be an ocean.
Ron, to just demonstrate how only a few years makes a difference. As obviously I am the elder statesman of this podcast.
Palm Pilot user, like religion.
We're going way further back. My very first computer, obviously it was my dad's computer, but our very first personal computer was an Apple II Plus. It shipped with we didn't have the minimum one. My dad did pay a little bit for an upgrade initially. Shipped with 32 kilobytes of RAM. not megabytes.
Yeah.
Definitely not gigabytes. Kilobytes. And dad splurged eventually and got us the language card expansion. So we bumped up to 64 kilobytes.
Ooh. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that my uncle had one of the Commodores. It was something, right? Like, I remember having to load some kind of like a Space Invaders type game on a cassette tape.
Yep.
And I had to play the whole way through to load the information into the computer in order just to play it.
Turning over floppy disks, switching disks. If you only had, when my dad finally broke down and allowed us to buy a second disk drive so that we didn't have to do this all the time, but you could have 2 of them at the same time.
It was like luxury, wasn't it?
It was life-changing. And then playing Castle Wolfenstein, and you get to a point, and then it says you got to change the disc, and so then you go to you do it too early, and the disc starts cycling.
Boy, kids just you don't understand. Even first PC I had was the one I bought. I think it was like 1998. Everything was still CD-ROM at the time. Yeah. There just wasn't enough onboard memory. I mean, you loaded that thing every time. The only thing the computer stored was maybe progress or game data. So you could jump back in.
And you knew how good and how graphically intensive a new game was by how many discs shipped. I can't remember what it was, but I remember when I got one game, it had 7 CD-ROMs. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. It's got 7 CDs worth of content. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it really is something. And I thought, gosh, even on the Nintendo 16, I guess megabyte or 16-bit. Maybe it was 32. I don't know. It was a Super Nintendo.
Oh, Super Nintendo was 64.
Digital pictures of the players in NHL 94. I'm like, my God.
And they were terrible pictures.
They were grainy, but they were actually real pictures, just digitized of the players. I'm like, boy, man, this is cutting edge shit. Now, and to contrast that with what happens today, my son accidentally bought NBA 2K or NBA 25 or whatever the hell it is, because he accidentally stepped on the button and like instantly had it. And that thing looks exactly like the players. That's today. No CD-ROM, no floppies, no cassette tape to load the information, an accidental push of the X button on the PS5. And you've got,
accidental.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do believe it was a mistake because he called me right away. We were in Illinois, my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. They made it 50 years.
Congratulations to the Nuttles, by the way.
I'm not going to make it that long. I think I'm going to run out of years before I even get near 50, but whatever. Yeah, their 50th anniversary was fun.
Nice. But he called you to let you know, Dad, I'm sorry. It was an accident.
I do genuinely believe he didn't mean to. According to him, the controller was under the blanket. He's not even sure how he did it, but it was a $70 digital download.
Wow. Yeah, and there you go. And that's actually another thing, right?
Played 1 minute of it. He didn't even want it.
That's another thing. Digital download, right? When we played whatever the game was, right? NHL, Madden, whatever it was back in the day, when that game shipped, those were the player ratings. There were no updates. Didn't matter how much. I mean, look at this. They've already updated, I think it was TJ Edwards' rating for the Bears based on one game. They've already bumped his player rating in Madden.
Yeah, that's right. Like Ken Griffey Jr.'s baseball. It is. No, that guy doesn't play with that team anymore. Yep. But he's there. You're not moving him. There were no trades.
And that's kind of what you respected about you don't see it as much anymore, but games like Backyard Baseball, where they just made people up because you weren't playing it thinking, oh, this guy should be rated better than this. He's having a better season than this. No, doesn't matter. It's just some made up character. It's fun.
Is it Baseball Stars, Baseball All Stars? One of those that you could actually create. It was the first game you could create a player, name a team, do that kind of thing. So I thought that was a pretty big deal. I think that might have been on the first Nintendo.
So I had a friend who introduced me to Micro League Baseball on my Apple, and I don't know if he had it or if somebody else got it to me, but there was an editor for Micro League Baseball, so you actually were able to make your own teams and input information, but all that it was the stats. And so the game would, the game would interpret a player's power, speed, all of that just based on stolen bases, triples, home runs, kind of the way that we interpreted a player's power and speed.
All right. Well, you can't have that now. You got to have all the other.
That's right.
Peripherals. All right.
That's right.
Yeah. Going back in time, the last thing I recall, and I should have brought one down from the attic, but do you remember the movie format? It was called CED. It was capacity something disc, right? It was it was size of a record. It came in a hard case because they were real susceptible to dust and everything else. You couldn't get anything on them.
So they were kind of like laser discs.
Not laser discs. I thought
light.
So too. No, they were actually more like a vinyl record.
Really? Wow.
They were called CED. My uncle had a player. I mean, probably weighed about 75 pounds. Each disc was heavy too. You had to keep these damn things in milk crates if you wanted to keep a collection. But it only played about an hour on each side, and you'd have to flip the disc over. But it worked a lot like it had a stylus, so it worked a lot like a record. I don't know how the hell it worked. It obviously lost the war with like Beta and VHS.
Right.
But it's called a CED. Now these are collector's things, right? Like I have I think Star Wars and the Empire Strikes Back, just because of the artwork on the big, it's like a big pizza box. Right. But it's pretty cool. But that's that's going back in the time where that was a rare form of media that probably a lot of people don't know about. I'll have to dig up a picture. I took one there, but they're called CEDs. They're actually really, I think they're neat collectible items. I mean, the picture quality and everything was shit. Those things were really susceptible to scratching and everything else. And pretty sure I wore out the original Star Wars on that one.
I had a friend who, and I thought theirs was a laser
media with every time you play it, the quality downgrades. I mean, those are we're longing for the times, Pete, when everything was worse in just about every way.
That's right. And it had a finite lifespan, depending on how many times you were going to play it.
So you had to savor every play.
Yep. I had a friend who I thought that they had a Laserdisc player, but maybe they had a CED, because I remember it was a huge disc and you slotted it into this thing. And then, about halfway through the movie, it ejected and you had to turn it over and slide it right back in.
See if I can find it while you're talking. I'm gonna dig one of these up. I know I have one.
All right. Well, while you're digging it up, while you're doing research, I'll go to the library and we'll play a few moments that I picked out, because I mean, obviously David Prowse provided the physicality, but there was nothing like the voice that and everybody says it, right? Ultimately it was James Earl Jones's voice that really made Lord Vader and made him intimidating. And first one I'm going to go to, obviously, is it's not his first appearance, but I think it was the first time where I think the audience, definitely I, had any sense of just how threatening Darth Vader could be.
Don't be too proud of this technological terror you've constructed. The ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force.
Don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer's ways, Lord Vader. Your sad devotion to that ancient religion has not helped you conjure up the stolen data tapes, or given you clairvoyance enough to find the rebels' hidden fort.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Enough of this. Vader, release him.
As you wish.
I could watch that all day long.
That's obviously that's a top 5 Vader clip right there, right? That's when we were like, okay, what's he doing? Do you remember watching this for the first time, going, what's happening here? And
I was terrified.
Well,
I was going on 4. I was 3 years and 10 months old, 11 months old, and I was terrified.
What's interesting about that movie is, like, a lot of people's first impression that, now, when this came out in 77, I was only 18 months old. There's no way I remember. I probably didn't see it in its initial release. I probably saw it in the next year or two following, because they kept that thing stayed in theaters.
It stayed in theaters forever.
And I remember, dude, I had to be like 3 years old. My first registered memory of this. And it's not usually everybody else's recall is the ships flying overhead, right? That was the first thing they saw, and they're like, holy shit, what is this?
Yeah.
My big boom wow moment wasn't actually Vader. It was the stormtroopers busting through the Rebel blockade runner door. That was the moment for me. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. What the hell is this? That's my registered memory, and that's why it goes down as my favorite character in Star Wars, hands down. I mean, there's lots of good ones, right? But just the stormtrooper for me was always my favorite character. First action figure I wanted. If there's any collectibles or helmets or anything like that, that's the one I'm going to, like, every time. That was my favorite character, because that's the moment, like, everything like hit me. Like, okay. Well, I can share now because I found something here. This is what I was talking about. And how do I do this? How do I do this?
Should be at the bottom, and there a little button there that says start screen share.
I got it. You see it? Let me know when you see it.
Don't see it.
It might take a while.
Waiting.
Did I do it right?
I don't know. Let me see. Let me try switching us over to presentation. See if
there
that
we
helps.
go.
Hey, there we go.
So this is the old CED I was talking about. Capacitance electronic disc. This was it came in a hard case, like you think of the hard 3.5-inch disc floppies. It's kind of like what this was. You stuck the whole thing in the machine, and the machine did the work of separating it from the case. And yeah, you got 60 minutes on one side and 60 minutes on the other. So they had to cut the movie down a little bit, probably, because I think the original ran 2 hours 20 minutes or 2 hours 15 minutes or something like that. So they had to edit some things out of there. I'm just interested to
be interested to see what part of it was.
What did they trim down? Yeah, so this is, I love the artwork and everything on these things. You just don't get that anymore, right? Because you're doing everything, downloadable or electronic. Some people do. You don't get this kind of stuff anymore. But I thought these were. I have this one, and I have Empire Strikes Back. So I thought
it's interesting. If you go back to it, right? Go back to that second slide. You take a look at those pictures, and clearly they knew at the time that there was something iconic, something just incredibly visually eye-catching about those pictures, because I don't know if I'm sure you did. All 4 of those pictures, you've seen them everywhere, including on the Star Wars trading cards when those came out. And that picture of Han Solo is probably one of the signal images from the first movie.
You have, there was, I think when they released this movie into the first handful of theaters, they had this, or when they were trying to pitch the movie to get theaters to bring it in, they made this booklet, and they sent it out to all the theater houses, right? And a lot of these images were probably pulled from that. So they did have images that they had used to try to publicize and promote this movie, and a lot of these are coming from that, like the cockpit shot there with everybody in it. That's another one we've seen like a million times. I believe that picture of Carrie Fisher right there is probably, I think that's the exact same one that's on her figure card.
Yes, it was. You're right.
Yeah. So, yep, there you go, man. I'm going to stop sharing now, but that's a little bit of a dip into the past. What the hell I remember that for? But those were cool things, man. That's exactly how you bought them in the store too. They didn't come in another big cardboard sleeve or anything. How do I remember this? My mom, Kmart was our thing in Canton, Illinois, and there was no other stores, but you would go there and I would just stare at those things.
Yep. Oh yeah, I remember that. You would go into the Star Wars aisle and you would just look and dream.
Yep. Once in a while, Dad would return home from work or something. He would bring something with him like that.
Yep.
The old cantina place, that was the one he brought home just randomly, like from after work one day, and I played the hell out of that thing. I wore the cardboard down on the back. I still have it. The cardboard's gone. The scenery that behind it, and I know I browsed eBay once or twice to see if I could replace or even buy a replica of that, but I still have that cantina set. It was really cool.
Yep.
Anyway.
Yeah. If you kind of wish you could go back to your younger self and be like, why do you question if your parents love you? Like when they were shopping, right? They had gone to Kmart to get whatever it was that they needed, and they turned down the toy aisle to see if there were any new action figures, and if there was, and they knew you didn't have it, they knew it was a new one.
Yeah.
They picked it up.
Maybe your dad thought that way. I'm pretty sure my dad's motivation was, if I bring this home, I don't have to hear from him for at least 4 or 5 days.
He's not going to ask for it.
What my father was buying, he was buying silence.
Nice.
Well,
speaking of buying silence, let's go to another clip. This one was, I loved this one, especially because it was so well set up just minutes earlier in the movie. You knew what was going to happen, especially because of the previous clip that we showed. But just seeing this in theaters, this was great.
Apology accepted, Captain Nida.
The delivery.
Yeah, that one is that one's great. The Empire was to me like Vader was just a baddie, but I didn't have that fear of him in the first movie for whatever reason. I felt like he wasn't in charge. I felt like it was Grand Moff Tarkin was the big baddie, right? But Empire, it was more clear. This guy was just strangling people, left and right. And that Empire to me, like, and his voice was a little bit different in Empire too than it was.
Yeah,
it was more menacing. It was more mechanical. And then obviously Return of the Jedi, the opening scene there, arriving on the.
We're gonna get to that one. I have it. Of course, I have it.
Yeah, Return of the Jedi. Whatever they did with his helmet and voice and everything there, that was a lot more menacing.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting because again, it's as you're going through these clips and you're cutting everything, and I'm reflecting on it, and I'm thinking about all of this, and like you're right. Empire. All of a sudden, you're seeing Vader is shaking up the ranks of the Imperial Navy on a whim. Whoever he decides is a new admiral is a new admiral. He doesn't have to check with anybody.
Whoever pisses me off is
That's right.
Done.
Yep.
Yeah.
Found it interesting. Obviously not at the time, but like when you watch it again and you're like, General Veers didn't accomplish his mission. Vader didn't have any problems with that.
Neither did Captain / Admiral Piet.
Correct.
At the end either. And
that's right. But
I think it was at
Admiral,
the end.
Nita. Yeah, he's as incompetent as he is stupid.
Admiral Ozzel.
I'm sorry, Ozzel was incompetent as he is stupid, but still, Nita also got the short end of the stick there.
Yeah, and Nita was the most apologetic. He owned his mistake.
I shall apologize to Lord Vader in post.
Right, but you get Captain promoted Admiral Piet. Let the Millennium Falcon get away, and he had the oh shit look on his face.
Yep.
At the end of Empire, he survived into Return of the Jedi. So
he did. You
got to catch Vader at the right mood. Like, you fuck up. You just got to catch him at the right time.
That's right. You come talk to him when he's in his meditation chamber. He's willing to cut you a little slack later.
Yeah.
All right.
He's got some kind of emotional conflict. You can catch him there too.
Yep. Obviously, we've heard this one quite a bit, but the delivery on this is just impeccable. And as I was cutting these this morning, I thought, how many of these were one take in the studio? How many of these JEJ sat down and George was like, great job, James. Let's go on to the next one.
I have a feeling in the early days it was minimal cuts.
Yeah, here we go.
That was never a condition of our agreement, nor was giving hand to this bounty hunter.
Perhaps you think you're being treated unfairly?
No.
Good. It would be unfortunate if I had to leave the garrison here.
This deal is getting worse all the time.
The way he lingers over those two words, being and I, right? Perhaps you think you're being treated unfairly, right? Just that little pause, but he doesn't stop. Perhaps you think you're being treated, right? He draws it out. And the same thing with it would be a shame if I had to leave a garrison here, right? Just that. Yeah. You can't teach that. You can't.
No, that's a great scene. It's a great piece of dialogue there. You can probably attribute a little bit of that to Larry Kasdan, right?
Yep.
He wrote that one, but that's one of my favorites.
And the contrast between the two of them, right? Lando is so panicked. He's at a complete emotional high, and Vader, through James Earl Jones's delivery, because you could have put anything over that, right? Prowse gave you what he gave you physically. Just I'm completely in control here. I don't need to raise my voice at all. Perhaps you think you're being treated unfairly? We can discuss.
Yeah, Lando held his emotions in check at just the right time. He'd used his limit of leash and realized it.
He felt the little tug.
I guess I understand why David Prowse was pissed forever, right? That his voice wasn't used, but I just, rest in peace. Have you heard your fucking voice? There's no way they were using your voice in that, like anti-menacing. Like,
Yeah.
he picked. There were other considerations for that voice, obviously Orson Welles, but it might have been too recognizable. Yeah, James Earl Jones was the dude was Vader to me. I don't care who was in the suit. And I don't know whether to like this or not, but he established it. So we have Vader's voice because of him, right? We never would have had the same voice if not for him. But they don't need him to do that anymore. The way technology has done it, like I'm pretty sure in the Obi-Wan series, that's not James Earl Jones delivering those lines. He did in Rogue One. You could tell that was an older, much older James Earl Jones, right? I'm surprised they didn't go back and kind of maybe do what they did with Luke Skywalker and Mando, where they've de-aged the voice a bit more. I think they use that technology called respeecher or something like that. But I'm surprised they haven't gone back and fiddled with Rogue One. But
give him time.
That's his last performance that I know of. I know he came back and did the voice in Rebels too, but I think Rogue One post Rebels, I believe, but maybe not. But yeah, that might have been his last true performance. But in Obi-Wan, the Kenobi series, which I'm disappointed by, and I know you're not a fan of, but the Vader voice in that show was spot on. Really was. So.
Yeah, and you had mentioned it before. You know, if you go back and you look at his IMDb page, just how astounding it was. And I would say that if you ever want to go down a James Earl Jones rabbit hole, just search for James Earl Jones Fences. His performance of Fences on Broadway, and there's actually in the Tonys back in the, I think it was in the 80s, maybe around 87, something like that. Might have been earlier. Anyway, they had a feature of him in his in the kind of one of the real climactic moments of Fences, when his son says to him, "Why don't you like me?" And the scene between the two of them is just it's an iconic scene. And his performance there just, and you know, I mean, obviously he had been doing it for months on Broadway, but to just pick it up right there in the theater at the Tony Awards, incredible, absolutely incredible.
You know, good old Apple's cashing in on it, right? They have the James Earl Jones button.
Of course,
buy everything, right? Like the whole catalog for whatever $100, but yeah, they're cashing in on it. Why not?
All right, you referred to it. It's obviously got to be our last James clip. And I know I've mentioned this many times over the years, but when I saw this in the Dolby Theater at Woodfield Mall in 1983, and I know I've mentioned this many times, my dad had actually stood in line at work because he worked in Rolling Meadows. He went over to the Woodfield Mall and spent his lunch waiting in line to get us tickets for opening night. And then my mom and I drove in to Schaumburg and met my dad at the theater. And then we stood in line, went in, sat down. And when this moment came on screen, the whole theater erupted in applause. Even before you saw the character, you just saw his boots and the place erupted in applause. It was honestly one of the most magical live theater performances. And by theater, I mean live movie experiences that I've had in my entire life.
Vader, this is an unexpected pleasure. We're honored by your presence.
You may dispense with the pleasantries, Commander. I'm here to put you back on schedule.
I assure you, Lord Vader, my men are working as fast as they can.
Perhaps I can find new ways to motivate them.
I tell you, this station will be operational as planned.
The Emperor does not share your optimistic appraisal of the situation.
But he asks the impossible. I need more men.
Then perhaps you can tell him when he arrives.
The Emperor's coming here?
That is correct, Commander. And he is most displeased with your apparent lack of progress.
We shall double our efforts.
I hope so, Commander, for your sake. The Emperor is not as forgiving as I am.
Yeah, they there are lots of parts in Return of the Jedi that people love. That has to be the best one. The whole opening sequence of Return of the Jedi was just fantastic. And as a young kid in the 80s, you had to wait 3 years between these things, right? And even for the prequels, to that matter. But you had to wait that long. You knew he was pissed going into this movie. He just kind of lost the last round, right? His quarry got away. But that voice, they polished everything up for this intro. The helmet's shinier, the boots are shinier, everything's pristine. And what I love about those hangar scenes too, if you ever have caught, excuse me, any of the making ofs, just the matte painting and the matte work that they used in those scenes is incredible. And nobody knew at the time, had no idea, unless you were familiar with Hollywood, the way movies were made. You had no idea. You thought, man, they dressed up 1,000 stormtroopers when the Emperor arrived in this massive set. And then you find out like 20 years later, it's a goddamn painting on a piece of glass. And the actors were only like a dozen of them. But yeah, amazing, man. It's got to be a top 5 scene in Star Wars in general.
Yeah, you're right, because of the camera angles and the performances and the music, the way it all plays together. Yeah, it was incredible. And something I noticed in his performance, again, while I was prepping for this show, the exasperation that you hear in Vader's voice that we had never heard prior to that. We had heard anger. We had heard, we had heard him being wily. You'd never heard that level of exasperation. And looking back on it now, it's like, oh yeah, no, he kind of fears for his own existence a little bit.
Yeah. Boss is coming, right?
Yep, like the boss is coming and my ass is on the line. And if he's unhappy, this is not, you're dismissed.
He was whipping things into shape before the boss arrived, because it's going to reflect on him if it's not ready, right? So yeah, that was it's all brilliant, man. I think that looking at, I was thinking about Rogue One for a second. I saw the comment in the chat there that he might have done Rogue One the last season of Rebels, right? So they probably had him in studio and just did everything. But looking at Rogue One, if I could make one change to that movie, and I think it's obviously the best thing that Disney has put out, I think under their ownership has been Rogue One, right? So one out of the, call it 5 movies they made, it's the only one I can go back and watch and enjoy a lot. So I would just wish they would have held Vader off until that very last scene.
I agree.
We didn't need the whole Mustafar thing, I don't think. But if they would have just held him off until that last scene, can you imagine the eruption in the theater? Now, I saw it like 10 days after it released. I was in China at the time. So I didn't watch it opening night. I went straight from the airport, straight to the theater with my brother. And that was the first thing I did. I know I had a family that hadn't seen me for a couple of weeks, but I had to go check this out. They could wait. They did. But yeah, so I wish they would have held off to that last scene, but whatever, right? Like can't rewrite history. But yeah, so this is a much more fun topic to talk about than what was the origin of this show.
Right. But in a way, this very much is right. That opening monologue is absolutely, it's the perfect encapsulation of the origin of this show, because it brings our two loves together in one man and a speech that was written for him.
I mean, if they modified the line at all, it'd be the one constant has been, well, you can't even say that anymore. It's been Star Wars. And the
one constant kind of has been James Earl Jones.
has been, because you can't say Lucas's anymore.
Nope.
And you can't see the quality of Star Wars storytelling. It has been constant anymore either. But you got Mark and you had James, and they're fading fast, man.
They are. Well, I know you got to go, and I got to feed the boy. But I'll tell you, I think this is the right way to go out. But I also think that this just illustrates how good James Earl Jones' delivery was on this, because the last clip that I'm going to play. Actually, do you have anything that you want to say? Do you want your soccer minute this week? Okay. The last clip I'm going to play by, I think, inarguably the best voice in baseball ever. Same speech, still doesn't have the same impact. So Vin Scully's going to take us out. We'll see you guys next week. Enjoy the weekend. And hey, here's to the boy and I being at loss 117.
Ray? People will come, Ray. They'll come to Iowa for reasons they can't even fathom. They'll turn up your driveway, not knowing for sure why they're doing it. They'll arrive at your door as innocent as children, longing for the past. Oh, of course, we won't mind if you look around, you'll say. It's only $20 per person, and they'll pass over the money without even thinking about it. For it's money they have, and peace they lack. And they'll walk out to the bleachers, sit in shirt sleeves on a perfect afternoon. They'll find they have reserved seats somewhere along one of the baselines, where they sat when they were children and cheered their heroes. And they'll watch the game, and it'll be as if they dipped themselves in magic waters. The memories will be so thick, they'll have to brush them away from their faces. People will come, Ray. The one constant through all the years, Ray, has been baseball. America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers. It has been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again. But baseball has marked the time. This field, this game, it's a part of our past, Ray. It reminds us of all that once was good and could be good again. Oh, people will come, Ray. People will most definitely come.